750 here, Big 550 KTRS. He is the governor of Wisconsin, and he wants to be your next president. Governor Scott Walker, welcome to the Big 550 KTRS here in St. Louis.
Good morning. Great to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
You won the governor's race in 2010. You won a recall election in 2012. You won re-election in 2014, and now you're running for president in 2016. That's 4 elections in 6 years. You must really like these elections.
Because I just don't know any better. My wife and I joke about that. We don't know any better anymore. No, we had some fun. We enjoy it. We were just out on Winnebago over the weekend in Iowa. We've been crisscrossing the country. Actually, we're going to be next Sunday over in Missouri. So we're making our way all over the place, and we enjoy getting out talking to folks. So yeah, we're gonna be out for the next. Hopefully the next year and a half on the campaign trail.
I don't want to ask you about the clown Donald Trump, but he has brought up immigration. And it's been reported that you have changed your position on immigration. You were once in favor of some type of path to citizenship and granting some type of legal status to undocumented workers. And now they say you've changed your opinion. Is that true? And what should happen with all this illegal immigrants?
Well, years ago as a governor, I really didn't have a position. I got asked once in an interview about it. I said I didn't support the Gang of Eight legislation and made a comment on that. That's what they hang their hat on. But I said, yeah, I clearly listened to people on this. I went to the border, met with the governor of Texas, and went up and down the border in the air, on the ground, talked to folks. I've talked to others from across the country, and it's pretty clear. I think Americans want someone who's willing to take the time and listen to people's concerns out there. And to me, it's a multi-step process. Secure the border for reasons far greater than just immigration. Safety, security, even sovereignty, we need to secure the border. Secondly, start enforcing the laws in this country. I don't believe in amnesty going forward. I believe we need a legal immigration system that puts priorities on American working families and their wages. And I think in doing so, that'll strengthen the American economy.
What happens when you deport a father or a mother and the kid is a legal status, is an American citizen? What happens to that kid?
Well, I think we should spend our time and our money focused on securing the border, again, through not just infrastructure, but technology and personnel, so that's the first step. Before we get into any of these other things, we've got to do that fundamentally. And if we're talking about deporting people, the focus should be on making sure that criminals, people who like this awful, sad story on San Francisco and others like that we're putting our emphasis on making sure that people are being asked to leave this country if they've committed, in this case, particularly violent crimes, and that they're not coming back in the United States. That's where I would put the time and effort and resources of the federal government, is in securing the border and focusing on public safety issues, because I think that's where our greatest weakness is right now.
So President Obama signed that Deferred Action for Parents of Americans, that DAPA, where he would go after sort of not go after the people who are here illegally, but here not breaking any laws. Are you in favor of that, or are you against that?
I'm one of the 25 governors that is in court with the president on that. The court so far has upheld our position at the president, and the reason for that is simple. It's bigger than just the policy itself. The President of the United States himself said before last November 22 times, at least 22 times, he said he couldn't do what he did. He said he was not the Emperor of the United States. He was President of the United States. He said it wasn't legal. He didn't have the ability to do that. And then about 2-3 weeks after the election, he said he was tired of waiting for Congress, which is interesting because his party controlled the House and the Senate the first 2 years he was president, and he didn't do any of this. So I think a cynic might suggest that this is a lot of politics more than anything else. But having said that, he said that he couldn't do it, and then he did it. We went to court because we believe no one man or woman is above the law in this country, including the President of the United States.
If you were president, when you were president, governor of Wisconsin, Scott Walker, and an undocumented worker or a group of them, whether they're 11 million, 10 million, or however many are there, what should happen to that undocumented worker? Should there be some law that grants them some type of legal status, some type of permanent residency, or should they be deported and go to the back of the line, and the cost involved with that? Which should happen to that undocumented worker?
Well, I don't think that's a choice we're in any position to make right now, because until we do the other steps I talked about, until you secure the border, until you start enforcing the law, which means putting the onus on employers to do what they're required to do by law today, and that is make sure that they're hiring people who are legal to do work in the United States. Until you start taking those steps and put in place a legal immigration system with the priorities I just talked about, anything else you can't start doing. I mean, that's where most of the debate in the media is right now, is at the end of that equation. But until you start taking those other steps, you can't even begin to make policy until you have certainty that you can tackle the other issues first.
One of the other things that you've sort of made some news on here recently with the Supreme Court decision legalizing gay marriage, you've come out against gay marriage, but you've also said that your two sons are in favor of gay marriage. Do you feel that you're on the wrong side of history, and that as this goes on 5, 10, 15 years from now, that your sons' philosophy and their opinion will be the popular decision going forward? Are you afraid you're on the wrong side of history?
Well, what I said is that the states, I believe, under the Constitution, have the right to define marriage. So I want to return that. And some states, a state like mine, back in 2006, the overwhelming majority of people voted, including myself, to define marriage as being between one man and one woman. Other states over the years have had similar positions. Others have legalized same-sex marriage. I just believe that constitutionally, that's a decision that was authorized for the states, not by the federal government, and that's what I'm standing up for, as I do in many other issues where I think states should be able to handle issues that aren't clearly defined in the Constitution as the federal government's responsibility.
Okay, on the issue of gay marriage, do you think it's acceptable if two men can enter into a legal binding state contract through some type of license?
No, I've said for 20 years, I think marriage is defined between one man and one woman. If people want to have other ways of defining their relationship, that's up to them. But I've said, as far as my state goes, to me, marriage has a specific definition, and that's the definition I've identified, like the majority of people in my state.
If one of your sons were to be gay, would you not embrace their marriage?
Well, I've got family members, not them, but I've got other family members that I love, regardless of what I think the legal definition of marriage should be. So to me, love transcends anything.
So you would be in favor of a family member having a same-sex marriage?
Again, my point is that I love people, regardless of how they define their marriage. And what I'm talking about is what the law should be or what it shouldn't be. And I mean, the interesting thing, we spend a lot of time on an issue that the next president isn't going to have a direct hand in. But I'm answering your question. Yeah, I believe that, to me, even though I believe legally that marriages should be between one man and one woman, that's what people in my state voted to put in their Constitution. As governor, I take an oath to uphold the Constitution of the state of Wisconsin, and that's what I've defended. But to me, in terms of whether it's a family member, a friend, or anybody else out there, I'm going to love people regardless.
Last question, Governor Scott Walker from Wisconsin. Your state, Wisconsin, in the presidential elections, have voted for a Democrat in every election since 1984. That's the last time Wisconsin voted Republican. And yet you're a Republican governor from that state that has just won 3 elections. Why do they vote Democrat for presidential elections and yet Republican for state elections?
Well, before there was a governor for 2 terms who was a Democrat, so it's the best of mixed bag. Wisconsin's more Democrat than Republican. There are more Democrats than Republicans in my state. I believe in our case, I won the last 3 elections in a 4-year period because we led with big, bold ideas. We went out there, and even if somebody disagreed with me on an issue here, an issue there, we carried independence by 11, almost a 12-point margin, because they want people who can lead. They want people who spell out. In my case, I was well known on a lot of economic and fiscal reforms we put in place. I think that the very same sorts of things that not just Republicans, but independents and even some discerning Democrats want of our next president. They want people with big, bold ideas. I hope people go to scottwalker.com and take a look at them, because we've got big ideas about shifting power from Washington back into the hands of the hardworking taxpayers in states like Missouri and Wisconsin and others across this country. And we're going to be talking about what we're for, not what we're against going forward.
In 30 seconds, would your Justice Department go after Colorado for legalized marijuana sales?
Well, to me, I think that should be a state issue, but I also think that you can't ignore the laws, and until the federal government changes the laws, You don't get to pick and choose in a just society whether you enforce the laws or not. You need to change them.
So you would go after Colorado?
Well, again, I would enforce the law that's on the book no matter what it is. And again, if we're going to change it, then change it in the Congress. I believe it's a state's issue, so I don't have a problem changing it. I don't think marijuana is something that should be legal. I've opposed that in my own state because law enforcement in both political parties have told me, forewarned me that that's a gateway drug that they worry would open the door to others out there. But to me, I still think that's something best handled at the state level. But the federal level, you got to change the law. You don't just get to pick and choose which laws you enforce.
Governor Scott Walker, safe travels. Enjoy your trip to St. Louis, and I'm sure we'll talk to you down the road.
Thank you much. Bye now.
8 o'clock, KTRS St. Louis, ABC News in progress.